I'm here to tell you the judges 100% got this completely wrong. And we're going to talk about the event and everything else, but we just have to state facts here. Jorge Masvidal just got robbed in the middle of Anaheim, California. What do I mean? The breakdown, let's go. All right, so yes, this event was awesome. Funny how on a night filled with high-level boxing over on Top Rank with Shakur Stevenson and O'Shaquie Foster and Abdullah Mason, they got their shine, absolutely, and rightfully so, but the MMA fighters sold out 18,000 in Anaheim, California to give boxing the biggest spotlight it had in its sport on a night of high-level fighters. You had people like Carmel Mouton on the undercard. You had a surprising Shane Mosley Jr. beating Daniel Jacobs. You had Chris Avila beating Anthony Pettis. I think I said that. Maybe I didn't. And then the main event had a big fight feel. 18,000 sold out. It was crazy. But we're here to what actually happened in the fight. This, to me, is insane, but Nate Diaz beat Jorge Masvidal with a majority decision win of 98-92, 97-93, and then a 95-95 draw. What has happened here is egregious. I don't understand this, but it was essentially a fight that you would expect out of the two. Nate Diaz coming out with heavy volume, heavy pressure, trying to impose his will on Jorge Masvidal. And I'm just going to say this. Jorge Masvidal, again, the levels are relative, but he looked better than I think I can remember any MMA fighter transitioning to boxing looking, outside of maybe the Conor McGregor-Floyd fight, because it's Floyd Mayweather and Conor looked pretty decent in that fight. Jorge looked good as a boxer. He was switching stance. He came out in southpaw for most of the fight, which he never really does. He's an orthodox fighter. He was boxing southpaw and looked great. He had great combinations. He had power behind his punches. He was accurate, he was precise, and I thought he won this fight. Round by round, I guess the pressure and volume of Nate Diaz, and the word I'm saying volume is not to indicate the landing percentage or the landing volume of Nate Diaz. We'll get into that in a second. I mean the pure output of punches are what won him this fight. And I'm not even upset if you wanted to call this a draw, or maybe if you wanted to slightly say there was a way that Nate potentially was able to win this fight, and I'd still have an argument for that. But to say Nate won this fight 98-92, 97-93, that to me is insane. I thought those scores, when I was hearing them being read out, were clearly going to be for Jorge Masvidal, because I did think he won this fight 7 rounds to 3. I thought it was pretty clear, maybe a 6-4, but I thought it was pretty clear, 7-3 for Jorge. Round by round, you saw the story of high volume for both guys, by the way. This was 1,400 combined punches between the two. That's fucking insane. But it was mostly Nate throwing the highest of volume, and whether those were the most damaging shots in the world, they were not. They were a bigger output than Jorge was putting out. Bars. I do have to get, if we're going to get technical and talk about how volume sometimes in the night and in the moment to a judge in the backyard of a Nate Diaz is going to see him walking forward and throwing more punches, we also do technically have to describe some of those punches, which in the clinch were open palm strikes from Nate Diaz to the side of Jorge's face. This is not a legal punch in the sport of boxing. It isn't. The open palm is not considered a striking, scoring part of the hand. So these slaps to the side of the head technically are not scoring shots, which is why I'm baffled by what I'm seeing online right now, that people legitimately think that Nate Diaz outlanded Jorge Masvidal. And I do consider those little open hand kind of side swipe slaps to be a portion, at least, of what Nate Diaz landed in this fight. There was never a point that I saw Jorge Masvidal hurt. There was never a point that I saw Nate Diaz consistently land clean punches, more so than Jorge Masvidal landed clean punches. And the stats reflect that, as the CompuBox numbers have come out, and this is round by round and total that I'll show you. So again, according to CompuBox's total strike count, Nate Diaz landed 36 of 316 jabs, while Jorge landed 30 of 204. Body punches, Jorge Masvidal landed 27 to Nate's 20. Power punches, Jorge Masvidal landed 152 and actually threw more power punches than Nate Diaz did. Nate landed 115 of his 424. Total strikes added up, that would be 182 total punches of 654 for Jorge Masvidal, and 151 out of 740 for Nate Diaz. So again, you see a clear 90 or so more punches thrown by Nate, but 30 more on 90 less landed by Jorge, and again, a differential of 40 plus in the power punch department. This was clear to me before I even saw the stat sheet that this is what I had seen. I had seen Jorge land more power punches and honestly land more total clean strikes. So just to clear this up, again, in total statistics, which is not how boxing is judged, and we'll get to that, every fight is judged round by round, so this doesn't paint the full picture, but just as a summary, Jorge landed more punches, he landed more power punches, and he landed those punches more accurate, which is essentially the two highest level priority scoring criteria for the sport of boxing: damage, volume, and defense. Being hit less than you are hitting the other individual, and doing so with damage behind punches and volume behind punches. Ring generalship is a scoring criteria, and I will give you that, but it is a tier 3 scoring criteria, meaning it is under the things I just listed. It is a third determiner when other things are similar and or the same. Now you may say, Wade, okay, well, that's just total punches. That's not how fights are scored, which I'll acknowledge. But then we get into the round-by-round scoring, and it is clear once again from the total punches landed and thrown that Jorge Masvidal lands more punches in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 10 rounds given. And again, in the rounds he loses, there's one round where Jorge lands one more punch than Diaz. There's one round where Diaz lands one more punch than Jorge. There are clear signs here this was a Jorge Masvidal win. So I'm baffled by this decision. I really am. I thought Jorge looked great. I thought Nate looked great as well. He was in way better shape, but I feel for Jorge because his performance, and again, nothing against Nate's 209 fan base that's gonna kill me in the comments. Nothing against him. It was just Jorge's performance, his accuracy, his power behind punches, his intention behind punches, his ability even off of the back foot, which is another entire thing that I can't stand about boxing, the ring generalship just meaning someone walking forward. If I'm making you walk to me by moving backward, how am I then not also controlling where the action takes place and therefore the fight? For my hardcore boxing fans, you're sitting here going, Wade, okay, Jorge may have landed more, he may have landed more accurately, he may have landed more power punches, but he didn't work enough. He didn't work as hard. I don't agree with you, but I hear you. But then you'll have to explain to me the O'Shaquie Foster fight that happened tonight. The exact same scenario happened. Maybe not in the unrefined way that we saw Diaz and Masvidal, because it's not high-level championship boxing, but he landed more punches even while throwing less. And universally, it's been agreed upon tonight that O'Shaquie Foster got robbed, got his championship taken from him, that he won 11 of the 12 rounds, yet I don't see the same energy here for Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. Maybe I'm the one that's seeing it wrong, but I think that tonight was just a misstep by the California State Athletic Commission. Once again, when it comes to combat sports, it was a swing and a miss. I thought it was flat out wrong, and I rarely use the word robbery. You guys know this. I don't think it's one to be thrown around, but I thought this was a clear robbery. I thought Jorge Masvidal clearly won this fight. And that's the last I'm going to say about it, because I'm quite frankly, I'm not upset about the event, about the fight. I thought it was an amazing event. I was super happy to just see it, and I was pumped for the entirety of it. And even watching the fight back, it's a great fight. Give me a rematch. Awesome. Like, it wasn't a blowout, but in the post-fight interview, Nate Diaz calls out Jake Paul again. And I got to say, for Jake Paul, that's probably the best result you could ask for, because Jorge showed me something in there that I would be very interested. I know he's a little smaller at 175, but I'd be very interested in a Jorge Masvidal-Jake Paul fight tomorrow. Like, I think that would be an interesting stylistic matchup for Jake, because Jorge was very slick technically. Very, very good boxing. This was the event that everybody's talking about tonight. It wasn't Shakur Stevenson. It wasn't O'Shaquie Foster. It wasn't Abdullah Mason. It was Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz in a boxing ring. Two guys that have barely done it before in their careers. That should tell you something about the sport of boxing and what it really could do to maximize its potential. You hear MMA fighters talk about it all the time. They love the sport. They want to come back into the sport. It doesn't just have to be MMA fighters boxing. It just needs to be people we care about. Forget the Protect the O Foundation, and let's just get back to that. The golden era of boxing, and I hope you can do that. Because while this wasn't the highest level boxing match, it made you feel like there were some personal stakes, and that's what made this event interesting. You guys let me know, man. I'm super happy with the way it turned out. I love the event. I love the fights. But, and I got to say this as we end off, I think they got this wrong. I do think Jorge Masvidal was absolutely robbed. You guys agree, disagree? Let me know in the comments down below, because I think I got this one right. But as far as what happens with Nate and Jorge next in their careers, and even what the realistic score of this fight should have been, Don't have those answers. I guess we'll find out.